Welcome to Big Life Weekly Series, where we empower high achievers to break free from limits, unlock their natural potential, and live a big life. I'm your host, Robert Acosta, and each week we will explore the strategies, mindsets, and tools you need to thrive, not just in your professional career, but in every aspect of your life. Whether you're a leader looking for a better balanced life, an entrepreneur aiming for sustainable success, or someone ready to take the next step toward your best self, this podcast is your space to grow, reflect, and take action. Let's dive into today's episode. Hello, I'm Robert Acosta. I'm with Mark Jacobstein from Gemini Health in Palo Alto, California. Welcome, Mark.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Let's get started right away so we can showcase your business. So, Mark, can you give us a 90-second overview of what your business does and why you got into it?
Absolutely. So I am the co-founding president of Gemini Health. And Gemini's mission really is to use AI and cutting edge technology and science to remake behavioral and mental health to help improve the sort of anxiety and concomitant depression problems that we have in the United States and globally. We're working on this because we have a massive problem with mental and behavioral health. There are 50 million plus Americans who struggle with anxiety. It is a terrible comorbidity. It makes people's lives challenging. It leads to things like suicide and addiction. And the current therapeutic modalities we have are not effective enough, and we don't have enough of them. It's a joint problem. And so several years ago, along with my co-founders, understanding that what was happening in AI was going to open up the ability to improve therapy, to augment therapy in ways that could never have been done before the sort of the AI revolution. We set out to build a service that was going to provide highly effective therapy for people in ways that was scalable and with new care models that were enabled by a combination of AI and mobile in order to really bend the curves for people who struggle with anxiety and depression. There's personal reasons for pursuing this, my own challenges with anxiety earlier in my life that was helped by therapists, but also more importantly, we just understand that this is one of the great unmet medical needs that we have as a society.
Right. Okay. So this is maybe gonna sound a little bit weird, but what do you enjoy most about your work in the mental health business?
It's actually similar to work that I've done before. I'm a committed generalist. I sit across a lot of different functions within companies. I've built in a lot of different areas. I love the interplay between world-class clinicians, world-class ML and AI people who think about user experience, our patients and clients themselves, in sort of being in the middle of that mix to ultimately build a product or service that is going to change people's lives is something that I really enjoy and always have in businesses, this business and many businesses that I've worked on earlier. I like having access to the best minds in the world in psychotherapy, as we do, and the best minds in the world in ML, and understanding what is feasible today that wasn't feasible even 6 months ago, let alone 6 years ago, and what that means for the product, and sort of pulling that all the way through to what is ultimately going to be a patient experience and hopefully one that's clinically effective.
So innovations, everything that it has to be with innovation, even through those minds that you work with, and create something out of the blue and connect the dots. I think it's something very fulfilling, right?
It is, and to your point, sort of the stitching things together from different fields is something that I've always enjoyed. It's why I became an entrepreneur. I didn't set out to be a business person. I don't think that's what I would have predicted was going to be my career path at 22. But by the time I was 24, I was starting to stitch things together and seeing how things would fit together. And that's when I started my first business, and it's now been a 31-year journey here.
Right. So you're doing this like as an entrepreneur, so like freelance, connecting the different other companies or different other, I would say, medical doctors. So how do you define success in the work you do?
Yeah, I mean, specifically for Jiminy, we define success as, are we able to deliver safe and effective, high quality care to patients in a scalable way? So in mental health care today, there are not nearly enough therapists, so there's not nearly enough care. And the care that people provide doesn't move the needle as much as people would like in terms of improving their anxiety, their depression, any sort of downstream impacts. For us, we're looking at two things. Can we be effective? While remaining safe, can we be effective? And can we do this in a way that is scalable, that it can't be when all you have to provide the care are human therapists, and there simply aren't enough of them. So for us, that's how I would define success. We are providing high quality care that is effective to lots of people.
Right. And I guess the scalability is not only because you want to grow as a business, but it's an important issue because there are a lot of people with not the proper care.
That's right.
So you have to work harder or work faster, I mean, in order to reach more people. Is that
Well,
this?
and just a few numbers I mean, we all know about the loneliness crisis and people are aware of addiction crises, but with anxiety, for example, there are over 50 million Americans who struggle with anxiety. There are fewer than 250,000 therapists. So that's a 200 to 1 ratio. And many of those therapists are working either only on serious mental illness or don't practice evidence-based medicine. So the actual number of therapists that are available to take care of this 50 million plus people who struggle with anxiety is minuscule. This is why it's a venture scale problem. It's a software scale problem, and it's part of why when the LLM revolution happened, I've been thinking about improvements in mental and behavioral health for many years for a variety of reasons. When the LLM revolution finally happened, we had the ChatGPT 3.5 moment, kind of November of 2 years ago. Something clicked, and like this is something that we now can finally augment human therapists in ways that will actually be effective, as opposed to sort of something that's going to feel like a toy and people are ultimately going to reject. And it turns out that my co-founder Lewis had been thinking along very similar lines, and that's sort of how we got started on the journey.
Okay, so I'm just curious, even though you have mentioned, I think, part of the answer of this question, but what is the biggest problem or challenge you see in your industry? Your industry would be the mental health in this case, and how are you solving that for yourself, your clients, your colleagues?
Well, I mean, I think unfortunately, I don't think there's one. The two biggest problems are, one is there's not nearly enough care, full stop, as I just described. The other problem is that the care isn't effective enough. So the Cohen's D, which is the scientific measure of sort of return towards normal in standard deviation measurements that you can expect with the sort of best in class therapeutic care for people, and frankly for SSRIs and other meds, is about 0.35. It's not enough. What we would like is a much greater therapeutic efficacy. So you have an efficacy problem and you have a total amount of care problem. We think that with the advent of LLMs and the rise of AI and the types of work that we're doing, you can actually take on both problems. Part of the reason we believe that the efficacy has been as low as it is that even a world-class therapist who's doing exactly what they can and should for you is only available to you typically 1 hour a week. There's 167 other hours every week. And I don't get better at the guitar or at Spanish or anything else 1 hour a week. That's not how it works. It's very, very important to be able to sort of, and with something like cognitive behavioral therapy, which has proven to be among the most effective modalities for therapeutic care for people, a lot of what it's about is changing thoughts and patterns, patterns of thinking and reactions to emotions and thinking. And a lot of that is hard work that you should be doing sort of every day. Anyways, we think that the new technologies have enabled us to create care modalities where there's much more frequent contact between Jiminy and the patient in ways that will drive efficacy that you couldn't possibly do with just a person. So that is very, very important to us. The other piece, of course, is that if some of the care is now provided by software and AI, not just a human therapist, the ability to take care of more people expands, right? And so the goals really are intertwined here. We want to provide more care for more patients, and we want that care to be better. Underpinning all of that is it needs to be safe. This is different than lots of AI chatbots in where there's, I'm just trying to do research for you or something. Agentic AI, in a lot of contexts, there's no such thing as a sort of a safety issue, but that's obviously not true if you're in a healthcare context. And so a lot of the thinking and work that we do also is around making sure that the relationship between the AI and the therapist and the patient is one that allows us to be as safe as we possibly can.
Yeah, it's a very delicate matter, I know. So AI is it's new, let's say, even though it started a few years ago, and it's still new for a lot of industries and a lot of people. So who do you say is your ideal client? Someone that really understands the use and the benefits of AI, and what significant outcomes can they expect when they connect or work with you?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, I certainly no. For our ideal client is somebody who is in need of the service. They need to have a mobile phone. They need to be tech savvy enough and comfortable enough with a mobile device, and comfortable with things like text-based interactions as well as live video chats that they can use the service. But we don't need you to be technically sophisticated. What we need is for you to be open to change, and for therapy to be helping and improve your life, to have sort of diagnosable anxiety and to be in a headspace for improvement. I think beyond that, it's on us to make an experience actually that isn't intimidating technically. For example, the goal of the technology is not to be, hey, look at our nifty AI. The goal is to provide you as a patient with what it is that you need, whether that is information or knowledge or empathy or new understanding of the way that your thoughts and your emotions are affecting your behaviors and the interrelated nature. None of that is really about you being technically sophisticated per se.
Yes, how nowadays more people are actively seeking solutions to achieve better outcomes, or something that really is effective. So, what makes you unique in the way you help them achieve those outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several things about our approach that are unique. Certainly, one of them is the interplay between the human therapist and the AI. So this is not an AI only solution. Everybody has a human therapist. That human therapist oversees their care and is working with Sage, our AI, on the care model for you, and overseeing all of the interactions. And that's not just because we're not ready to take the training wheels off and the AI needs to improve. It's also because there's a lot of evidence that humans, in part of what helps make a good therapeutic experience and drives efficacy in that experience, is what's called therapeutic alliance, which is fancy therapy speak for like, do you like your human therapist? And so it's important that there's this human in the loop, and that is very important to us. But at the same time, and we are leveraging known best practices around things like cognitive behavioral therapy with many of the best therapists in the world. So our team includes the chair of psychology at Harvard and a computer scientist and therapist here at Stanford who's probably a world leader at the intersection of LLMs and psychotherapy. We've brought in many of the sort of world's top thinkers on how to make a great therapeutic experience in conjunction with a very effective and safe AI. But I think the other area of really radical innovation for us, though, is in the care model itself. So the one thing that is different from us, even from like just a great therapeutic experience with a human, is that the service is available to you 24/7, right? Which is different. There's no human therapist who, like, you're having a panic attack at 11 p.m., you can't call them. I mean, I think in an extreme case, if somebody was feeling suicidal, et cetera, probably they would perhaps have access to their therapist. But generally speaking, you get your therapist 1 hour a week. And it might be that Tuesday at 10 a.m. when you have your session isn't when you're having your panic attack. And it also means that your therapist isn't with you every day to encourage you to practice the exercises that are important for you to be practicing given where you are in your therapeutic journey, et cetera. Anyways, we've innovated very heavily on what the care model looks like for our patients.
Okay, so you're working with AI, and of course that is a trend, but do you see other trends coming within your business or in your industry, and how are you staying on top of that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so if you look at our industry sort of writ large as improvements in mental and behavioral health, there's certainly many very very interesting things that are happening that are sort of outside of AI, that are ranging from with transcranial stimulation to what's happening with new meds, including sort of personalized medicines, things that are happening with psychedelics, et cetera. We pay attention to them, but we're not. You can only do so many things. What we're trying to do right now is heal people with words. Is the way you think about therapy, and do the best possible job of that we can. There's enough important and hard work to be done there to do it safely, effectively, scalably, et cetera. That'll probably keep us occupied for some time. But I will say sometimes Lewis, who's our founding CEO, says, the goal someday is for us to be sort of the Genentech of mental health. And what he means by that is the company that does deeply innovative work, in across the entire spectrum of things that happen in mental and behavioral health, which would include things like serious mental illness. It could include things like developing new therapeutics beyond where we are today. But we're a startup, so we'll stick to our knitting here for a while.
So talking about trends, but talking about innovation, and this is something that just pops up in my mind. Is there a way, or is there something or a project that say, well, rather than using AI just for cure something like an illness, like mental illness, is there something or someone working in how to prevent the problem rather than diagnose and healing? I don't know. I just had that question.
Sure. I mean, first of all, I'm given how many people are trying to innovate right now with AI. I'm sure the answer to that is yes. And I would argue in some ways, I think of like treating people who struggle with anxiety and sort of prophylactically preventing somebody from ending up in an anxious place. I think they're all it's on the same spectrum. At the end of the day, understanding how your mind works and the relationships between thoughts and feelings and behaviors is useful for anyone, whether that is somebody who is struggling with diagnosed anxiety that is interfering with their life, or somebody who's not. We all have anxiety. It is part of the human condition. It is part of what helped keep us alive on the savannas, and it is useful until it's not, right? And everybody, I think, would benefit from the types of things that can be taught through a service like Jiminy. And so, the first version of our product, because you have to start somewhere, the tip of the spear for us is to work with patients where their anxiety is acute enough that they are solution seeking, right? And so they're looking for something like what we have. It is potentially something they would pay for or is reimbursable within a health system, et cetera. And that's the right place to start the business. But it doesn't mean that this wouldn't be useful ultimately to sort of anyone. My joke, not a joke. Anxiety it's part of the human condition because natural selection helped create it for us, and as I say, it's useful, but it doesn't always make us happy. And so there's unpacking that for everyone, I think, is actually something that we see in the long run.
Yeah, well, that's an amazing industry and an amazing mission, I would say. So, what advice would you give to someone just starting with this within the mental health industry? Just starting with it, what would be your advice to them?
Well, I mean, I guess first of all, read broadly. I'm not an expert. I'm not a psychologist nor a psychiatrist. I've obviously learned a lot in helping to build the business, and I have a sister who's been in LCSW for 20 years, et cetera. I care very deeply about the field, but there are people far more knowledgeable than I am for sure, and I think you could, there's an awful lot of good stuff out there to read. and it's in many different areas, right? There's the brain and there's the mind and there's relationship between them. There are people who are working on interesting things with meds. We're obviously working with therapy. There are people who are working on transcranial stim and other forms of brain stim, people working on psychedelics. It's all interesting. Greater and lesser efficacy depending on the area and the type of mental illness and mental health challenges you're talking about. I think some of the where one should go with that vis-a-vis, say, a career, et cetera, depends an awful lot on like your skills and your interests. AI specifically, which is where I spend most of my focus. I live here in Silicon Valley, and so it's all anyone can talk about these days. Even within behavioral health, there's lots of different applications for AI. We happen to be using AI in conjunction specifically with LLMs in order to help cure people with words, is the way I think about therapy. But there's, of course, AI applications in terms of drug development. In fact, I met Lewis, my co-founder, at our last company, ImmuneAI, which was single-cell genomics and machine learning to build better immunomodulatory therapeutics in an oncology setting. And so that was unpacking great biological mysteries using single-cell genomics and ML. Well, people are using similar techniques to try to develop better drugs in a mental behavioral health context as well. I don't know that SSRIs are the end-all and be-all for whatever we will develop for people with things like anxiety and depression. Certainly there's a big push into personalized meds. Right. And anyways, there's lots and lots of different applications. So it's a fascinating field for sure.
Yeah, it is. And in that path, a huge path of many years working on this, what is the biggest failure or challenge you have faced in this to this point in your life, and how has that shaped the way you do business?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess depends how you think about failure. I've been involved with quite a few businesses. I've been lucky enough to build a number of businesses that have been wildly successful. I've also built a number of businesses that failed. Interestingly, most prominently probably, I worked with Sam Altman back when Sam was just 19 to help build a company called Looped that ultimately Sam was able to sell, but wasn't a great big success despite having an enormous number of very, very talented people involved with it, not just Sam, but quite a few other people who have gone on to be sort of Silicon Valley famous and built important companies, et cetera. And in retrospect, though, like the reason that business failed, it was sort of the wrong idea at the wrong time, it was too early, et cetera. Right. I don't think about those things as failures exactly, though. I mean, we worked hard, we did our best, we learned a lot, and you have to be in it to win it. Like, you can't make something great without trying, and even right. Most of the best entrepreneurs out here have a number of companies that they tried that didn't work along the way. I will say, I don't know if the biggest failures, but the biggest misses in my career are not things that I tried to build that didn't work. I'm okay with those. If I have regrets, it is more about things that I should have seen that were really big opportunities that I didn't pursue. So I've been lucky enough. I mean, I started my first business in '94. It was in consumer internet, and then I built mobile businesses around 2001, 2002. I did genomics starting in the 2010s. I've been in the middle of a lot of very important revolutions in tech, and it's been very exciting. Every once in a while, you see something that you should pay more attention to, but you're already busy with your other project, and so you don't jump on the other thing. And those are the things, I don't think of them as failures, but sort of my biggest misses in my career are occasionally like, oh, I saw this thing. I mean, somebody introduced the notion of what would become social networks to me in 1998. Long before Friendster, let alone MySpace, let alone Facebook. Now, I didn't go build Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg did, and so he gets the credit, the glory, the whatever. But there's been numerous situations like that throughout my career, and I think if anything, over the course of the last 30 years, hopefully I've become more discerning with the ability to see, all these things are interesting, but this is the thing that really matters, right, and could really change the world in a positive way and impact a lot of people, and let's go do that. Even though this other project is interesting and it's already going, and that I think is sort of a hard lesson, but certainly one that I think over the course of 30 years is repeated enough times that hopefully I've learned it.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are failures, or there are no failures, just learning, right? Some just lessons.
Yeah.
And I would say, well, yes, that opportunity of Facebook. I don't know. Maybe you did the right thing. Maybe it wasn't good because in terms of money, but I think what you're doing is more meaningful. And maybe some of
Well, for
the
sure. I mean, certainly this current project feels very meaningful. Yeah. Now, the social networking was but one example. There were many others along the way where I wish I would have recognized
of course.
the opportunity. And hindsight's always 2020. It's easy in retrospect to understand that there were certain opportunities that were presented to you that would have been great. I mean, I will say one of the nice things about working in health tech, as I have mostly for the last 10, 12 years, is of course it does always feel meaningful. But I don't want to feel like, I don't want to denigrate, like lots of people who work in pure tech, they're not curing cancer, but if you make the whole world more efficient the way, I don't know, Slack did,
Yeah.
it's not just the economic impact and the way that flows through to all the other things that make the world better is just as important as somebody who's working on a drug to cure cancer. Like the world needs all of these things, and anyways, I generally supportive, of the. We all live better, longer, richer, healthier, happier, freer lives than we did 400 years ago. And a lot of that has been driven, the combination, right, of Enlightenment values and humanism combined with the scientific revolution and technological advances. And so for me, it's always felt like a privilege to get to work in the middle of that. It's nice that it also means you get to live in places like Palo Alto.
Of course, yeah. I think people like you and many people working in in different fields, as you say, not only need to be in health directly, are really, really changing the world. Are really changing the way people are more healthier, wealthier, and all what that you say.
We hope so.
Yeah, it is. It's happening. So, what is the one thing that has been most instrumental in your success, if you can choose one?
Curiosity, I suppose. I mean, if I'm going to put my finger on a single trait, I have worked in many different fields. Right? I have a claim to fame. It was inventing fantasy sports in my living room, online fantasy sports in my living room 31 years ago. I've built game companies. I've built mobile VoIP companies. I've worked in genomic-driven therapeutics and molecular diagnostics all over the place. I'm curious. I'm always interested in how the world works, how things work, and that has helped me not only be able to adapt to a lot of different fields, but as the world changes, right? The most interesting and important thing that was happening in the business world and tech, et cetera, in 1994 was the dawn of the internet with HTTP and the web. And then it was mobile in 2001, and then it was like inexpensive omics in 2010, and now it's what's happening with ML and AI. If you're not curious, you can't switch. And it's also allows me to pull on threads from different things I've seen at various times in my career and stitch them together. And that's what I do well. I'm not very good. It's also an understanding like what you're not good at. I'm not one of these people who can sit and focus on a single thing for 10, 12 hours. I don't know anything all the way down. There are lots and lots of people in the world who know a single thing much better than I ever will. But I know enough about a lot of things and then sort of stitch it together. And that's a function of the curiosity. And I've been lucky enough to sort of build a career around the strengths as opposed to around the weakness. If I had a job that required me to focus on one thing for 12 hours at a time, I don't think I'd be very good at it.
Yeah, I envision yourself being in a room and asking questions, which are your questions, and maybe you have a superficial answer and it's enough for you. But for someone else, you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and maybe solve something because you asked the right question, even though it's not necessarily for your benefit, but for the benefit of a project, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So talking about the future, what is the next growth area for you and your business?
Well, I mean, I think, at Jiminy, The most important thing that we're doing right now is continuing to develop safe and effective, clinically appropriate AI. It's a hard challenge. As impressive as all the things that we've seen with the foundational models, and it's astonishing, and the progress is astonishing. You can't just take an out of the box Anthropic or OpenAI instantiation and call it a therapist. It's not ready, and so it's very, very important that we continue to work on driving something that is empathic, that is clinically effective, that is has safety first, et cetera, so that we can, in fact, ultimately deliver lots of care via our AI in conjunction with our human therapists. That's the only way we can get to scale. And that's important, obviously, for our business, but it's most important for treating the tens of millions of people who need to be treated in what is one of the great unmet clinical needs that we have in this country. I mean, I think of un- and undertreated mental illness as the ultimate comorbidity. It's not just that it makes other health issues worse. It increases things, obviously, like suicides and addiction, but also it makes your heart disease worse and your diabetes worse and all the rest of it if you have untreated or undertreated anxiety. But on top of that, it just ruins the quality of life. And a lot of our social ills are a function of an undertreated mental illness. I think a lot of the challenges we have as a society and fracturing of America and the whole world, and anger and misinformation, et cetera, I think underpinning a lot of that is fear, which is another word for anxiety. Right. And so I think for us to achieve the goals we want to achieve at the scale that we want to achieve it, we have to build software that is able to help people with these challenges, and that's hard. So that is the focus. There's lots of other things to building a business, but if we get this right, all else will take care of itself. If we don't get this right, nothing else will matter.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, it's a huge mission, I would say. It's like I say, so with me, myself, I have a mission that happens to have a business. And I think that's the way. I don't know if you see it that way, but I think I see you in a mission.
That's right.
Which happens to have a business, right?
Well, and I think, most of the biggest success stories in Silicon Valley have been that way, right? And I mean, if you look at Google, the attempt to organize and make searchable all of the information on Earth is a mission. It requires you to ultimately build a lot of very complex technology, and fortunately for them, it also happens to be one of the world's great businesses if you happen to do it right. But I think that that's been true for most of the companies out here that have actually changed the world.
Right. So here comes a weird question, a funny question. If you could have lunch with one person, living or dead, who would it be and why?
My glib answer is Jon Stewart, because the combination of sense of humor, sort of shared view of the world, and his intelligence, and sort of a hero. But it's an interesting one. I mean, there's some other ones. I mean, like Isaac Newton's another one who sort of comes up. I was listening to, wasn't Bill Nye? Somebody was talking about Isaac Newton recently. Like, first he figured out gravity, fundamental laws of physics, optics, invented the calculus to do all this, and then he turned 26. And I was like, yeah, probably be an interesting lunch or dinner as well. It's a good question. It's very hard to come up with a single answer. Bruce Springsteen's another good answer. I don't know.
It's okay. Yeah, I know. There's a lot of people who would love to have lunch and to pick their brains, right? To understand how they are, why they are successful, or I don't know, many other things. But yeah, as well, keep in mind that question. So maybe you can have lunch with some, or at least mentally.
I can dream about Jon Stewart. Isaac Newton, not going to happen. Although maybe somebody will make the AI Isaac Newton, and that will be Close enough.
That would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, proxy. Yeah.
So, what is the best way for people to contact you if they'd like to work with you or discuss referral?
Sure. I mean, among other things, we're always hiring great. If you're a great AI or ML engineer who is inspired by what it is that we're working on, we are always looking for you. Similarly, investors who are looking at our space, or for that matter, clients, potential clients who could use our service. So we're just jiminyhealth.com. Jiminy is with 3 I's, jiminyhealth.com, and go from there.
Perfect. Okay, so that was amazing. I truly enjoy our conversation. So thank you so much, Mark, for being a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me on Big Life Weekly series. I hope today's episode gave you the insight, inspiration, and tools you need to move closer to the life you're meant to live. Remember, true success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about how you feel while you're achieving it. If you found value in our conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with others who are ready to embrace their big life. Until next time, stay focused, keep growing, enjoy life, and break free.